engaged in policy, but that's not where I come from. I come from asking when youth choose to engage in policy, that they think about it with a very critical lens. Okay, that there are many ways in which you can become part of an organization that quote unquote is doing good work. But if you're going into it simply to parrot what they already do, meaning mimic what they already do, but not actually learn some very, very critical details from the experience, you could actually be left at a disadvantage. Hopefully I'm making some sense so far. Okay. All right. I'll just give some basic examples of what I'm trying to get at here. When we think about the state of children, when you have so you have 1.2 billion adolescents worldwide, okay, which is pretty big, and one in four of the poorest adolescents have never attended school at all. Okay, we also have a situation where children comprise more than 50% of the extreme poor, okay, despite making up only a third of the global population. Okay, many children have the greatest exposure to violence in the southern part of the world. But when you think about what's happening in the developed nation of the United States, for example, many populations within the United States experience extreme exposure to violence. Okay, Black boys, African-American boys in the United States are 19 more times to be more likely to be a victim of violence than white young boys in the United States. Okay, so it's a very hostile environment for youth. So when we start thinking about policy and youth getting engaged in policy, you don't find it a little strange sometimes that youth suffer at greater rates than most demographic populations in the world, yet people still expect them to somehow be easily welcomed into policymaking. Those two things are in contradiction. Look, if adults wanted you in policymaking, youth wouldn't be in the state that they're in, if that makes any sense. Hopefully, I don't mean to sound cynical. Well, yes, I do, actually. Because there's a point to this. I'm not trying to depress you, okay? There's a point to this, okay? So what ends up happening is that youth, in addition to having this opportunity to work under adults, they can also be in these localized spaces or networking spaces where they produce these kind of generative community projects. And by generative community projects, I mean the work that a lot of you are already doing, okay? And I call it generative because these are spaces where policy change actually takes root. It might not be entirely focused on a policy, but if you're organizing folks to get access to resources that they might not normally have, and you're galvanizing and organizing people against particular political movements to suppress the population in one way or the other, what ends up happening from doing that generative work is that you're equipping people, both with the awareness, You're equipping people with the awareness and the resources that they need to advocate for themselves, which can over time can definitely lead to policy change. But that work in itself is not considered youth involvement in policy. That's actually back to youth activism. Okay, so let me get to my point. So what I'm getting at is that there are a few, and this is why I don't usually use slides in this, because I don't want to get in trouble for the things that I say. I can get in trouble for the things that I say. I'm not a big, because I'm born and raised in the United States as an African-American man. Okay, the United States can kill 15,000 people a year just through gun violence alone. Okay, I'm from a city that usually averages over 100 homicides a year, and the city only has 400,000 people. Okay, most of those homicides look like me. Okay, I saw my first homicide when I was 14, and this is in the U.S. This is in the U.S. Okay, U.S. is not unique to death and homicide. I'm very clear about that. But as this so-called model for democracy, it's always important to point out the level of violence that we have here. Does that make any sense? Okay, so My experience comes from working in nonprofit work, doing youth work, and et cetera. Being a young person, I was interested in change. So I want to talk about a couple of quick things. If you're going to be engaged in policy, there are a few things that I want you to consider. Okay. One, there's these couple areas. One area is when you think about the organization that you're working with or for, you want to think about mission interests. And whenever you start considering interests, you're considering the interests of all parties involved in whatever political change you're trying to make. The other thing you want to think about is systemic culture. All right. I just said I'm from the United States. You know, we're very democratic, land of the free, land of money, land of resources. But if you grow up here, you understand that you have to learn the systemic culture of political change, the systemic culture of organizations here in the United States, as an example. And thirdly, you have strategic questions you want to ask for every initiative you go into, every single one. So I'm going to start with the interests. You want to know if who you're working with has altruistic, humanistic interests, okay? Or if their interests are largely corporate or profit interests. Or are they political interests? Are folks looking for more political sway in a particular campaign with the public, etc.? Is there a person's ego involved in the movement that you're working with? Okay. And lastly, are folks doing whatever they're doing strictly for reputation? If I'm trying to address poverty in a given region and I'm partnering with a corporation, and then I also have a state entity, maybe the city government, maybe the governor, whoever it may be, is also interested in this, okay? I have to ask myself, as a young person involved in this, what are the actual interests involved? If the state wanted to do this, they might have done it before I came along, okay? If the corporation was truly interested in this, I want to know how much money they're putting into it, all right? And I want to know the history of this. All right. That's what I want to know. If I'm 17, 22, 24, 28, 30, going into policy work, my first questions are, what are the interests involved? Not just who they are, but on what level are they involved in this and why? Because you might be involved in it from your heart because you care. It's your community. This is valuable. But that interest is yours. That may or may not apply to all partners involved. Am I making sense so far? Okay. Last couple of things here. Well, I have a little bit of time. Systemic culture. A lot of organizations and movements suffer from a mismanagement of resources and mismanagement of money. When you're young and you go into organizations, that's usually the last thing that they'll tell you. Okay. That there's grants coming in, but maybe all the grant money is not always accounted for, or like in many nonprofit or non-government organizations, a lot of the money is administrative heavy, meaning that a lot of the budget is going to the executives of the organization. So then when you start to look at the amount of people actually served, perhaps those numbers might even be larger if the money was distributed a little bit differently. Now, technically, that's not actually mismanagement. I mean, look, technically, that's not mismanagement. If you wanted to, if your country wanted to end poverty, it might have made more progress before you came. Okay, and that's not on your president or whoever runs your country, but it's an important social fact to know. What I'm saying is that you want to understand if there is a problem with the distributions of resources in the movement that you're in. Okay. Secondly, the toxicity of an organization. Okay. I'm trying to be as polite as possible, but is this making any sense? Okay. Oftentimes, this isn't the history. So I used to teach the history of social movements for a decade. Okay. I also used to be a professor for a class on globalization as well. So I taught these things for a while. Okay. One of the critical things to understand is that you'll have people that are interested in making change in the community without actually being able to manifest that change in their own organization. Okay. So if you've seen this, I'm not telling anything new, but I want you to be affirmed in the fact that that is heavily problematic. Okay. In a space that wants to heal human beings, you might have a toxic executive. You might have harassment, abuse, bullying, all types of things happening in an organization. And somebody might try to convince you that it's okay because we're doing it for the greater good. It is not. They are lying. Okay. Because every single person in that organization is part of a community. You cannot justify ruining a community to help another community. We're all human beings on the same planet. I know it's actually a corporate justification that was then co-opted into social services, right? That you can sacrifice human beings. And that corporate consciousness actually was derived from a military consciousness. So you take a military framework, adopt it into corporations, because corporations compete and go to war with each other. And then that actually begins to define our idea of universal professionalism by looking at corporations. So then everybody tries to model what they do after corporations, forgetting that corporations try to model themselves after military. So what you end up doing is have people doing social service work having military principles, which don't make any sense. You cannot have people getting harassed in your organization while you're trying to liberate human beings outside the organization. Okay, so I get riled up. I swear, I don't do any narcotics or anything. I'm just hyper. I told you, I watch anime. Okay, so those are the systemic cultural questions we want to have, right? If we're an organization to help children, do we affirm the presence and the power of women in our organization? If we truly want to help people who are poor, do we challenge elitism in our organization? Are y'all following me? Okay, cool. All right. And then lastly, we want to have strategic questions for every single initiative we go into, okay? Every single initiative, we want to have these strategic questions, okay? One of the first questions we want to have is whatever we're pursuing, who does it help? Who does it help, okay? And how might it help them? I'll give an example. You have folks that are in my country, here in the United States and where I'm from, you know, in certain areas, you might have a serious drug problem and homelessness problem, right? And in the United States, sometimes those things go together, okay? People who are homeless might also suffer from addiction issues, but also important to note that in the United States, you do not have to be homeless to be addicted, okay? We have a lot of addiction that is completely separate from homelessness, okay? So in certain places, folks say, well, you know, since we have drug addiction, we have people using needles and, you know, syringes and all these different things. Perhaps we have to fight the spread of disease as we're trying to help the homeless. So folks might start a clean needle campaign and say, you know what? Instead of having folks using dirty needles that spreads disease while they're homeless, we want to give out clean needles. That's great. That's awesome because it helps stop the spread of disease. But does it stop homelessness? Hello? Okay, all right. So I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that you want to know that while I'm addressing this one thing, I'm still not addressing the other things. Are you following this? Okay. Now, why do I say that? Because if you don't know what you're actually addressing and the scope of which it may actually transform people's lives, okay? If you don't know that, then you might be thinking at a level that lacks depth, social depth, okay? One of the problems we see in policymaking worldwide is that it is often shallow, okay? It will start with an idea. Folks will say, well, this will work. I'll give you an example. If you're thinking about structural adjustment programs, International Monetary Fund. Raise your hand if you know what those were. Okay. Oh my goodness. I don't even have the time to explain. I get so excited. I don't even have the time to explain it. Oh my goodness. Do I have the time? How much time do I have? Till 12 minutes, 10 minutes?
You have 18 minutes.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right. So let's get into this. Okay, I'm gonna do this because I wasn't gonna talk about this too much, but I'm gonna talk about it now. Okay, all right. So we'll go back a little bit. So you go back to the 1980s and 1990s, right? And you have this loaning structure that we have in the world right now. Yes? You have World Bank, International Monetary Fund that gives loans to countries. Raise your hand if that makes sense. Okay, great. All right. And all this is kind of involved in and surrounded by our international trade policy, which is pretty much governed by the World Trade Organization, right? Of which a few countries tend to have the most votes, which is very odd. But they're not so odd if you think about colonialism and neocolonialism. But the point is that you have this order. Right? At some point, people call it even a new world order that came after World War II, right? So anyway, this is the important part. Calm down. This is the important part, okay? So when you got a loan, 1980s going into the 90s, when a poor country, didn't have to be poor, but colonialism was about the subjugation of nations. That's what it was about. It was about the control and perpetual subjugation of nations. So when you look at colonialism, people are like, oh, they established colonies. Y'all already know. A lot of Americans don't know this, but y'all already know what I'm talking about. Okay, so dig this. Sorry, calm down. So what ends up happening, okay, is that in order to get a loan, historically, you would sign up for a structural adjustment program, right? The structural adjustment programs, depending on who you read, I'm a critical educator, right? I'm a liberation pedagogue, so I think in certain ways, right? So depending on who you read, the structural adjustment program was essentially a plan that you would agree to adjust your country's entire economic and social structure to be able to prove that you could pay the loan back. Are you following me so far? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. All right. So as soon as this happens, activists around the world, I mean, even scholars from Noam Chomsky here to Vandana Shiva in India would tell you this isn't working, all right? Because the structural adjustment program required a couple things. All right. Are you following me so far? Okay. Look. When you sign on to the structural adjustment program, one of the points, I'm simplifying because we don't have a semester. You know what I'm saying? But what it was asking countries to do was rearrange their structure to recruit or allure or entice what was called FDI, foreign direct investment. Okay. And the foreign direct investment really took form in corporations. You want corporations to come in and set up shop in your country, right? And in doing so, the theory is they'll be able to increase your economy by setting up shop, adding jobs, etc. And that would build up your country's wealth over time. Okay. So there's all types of problems with this. One, to lure in a company. Now, remember I said earlier, you have to think about interests. Yes? What are the people's interests? With all due respect, most transnational companies are not interested in humanity. Okay, with all due respect, right? They're interested in profit. Okay, so they're not coming to countries to make it better. They're coming to countries to be able to do business at a cheaper rate. Yes? Okay, so the structural adjustment program is asking you to make things nice and attractive for them, which includes keeping wages low, lowering environmental protections and regulations. Yes, and redirecting social services into these type of infrastructure projects. So historically, that's lowering costs for lowering funding for schools. If you think in places like Ghana, for example, where it was taking money away from keeping water clean, for example. So that's another part, privatization of social services, right? You take something that the state pays for and then you make it private. So then the price goes up and people got to pay for it now, which makes the company a profit, which looks like it's bringing a higher GDP to the nation. You follow me so far? Okay, cool. All right. So where I'm going with this, as an example, okay, is that to so many people in the world, this was seen as a good idea. But everybody in these countries, well, not everybody, but many activists in these countries knew it wasn't a good idea. You bringing people here to exploit us, period. Okay? Now, it goes all the way till 1987. They changed it to what was called the Enhanced Structural Adjustment Facility, which essentially is an edit to structural adjustment programs that also didn't work. Are you following me? Then it goes all the way to 1999, and guess what? They decided to shift out of that and develop something different, which was the Poverty Reduction and Growth Facility. Why did I tell you all that? Why would I tell you all that? A number of things happened during those decades of the structural adjustment programs. A lot of policies were passed. A lot of youth were asked to come celebrate policies that were passed. A lot of people were asked, what do you think? Come to a meeting. Come to our celebration constantly. And over time, it was being proven that these programs were not working for the people that actually lived in these countries. Yet there were tons of individuals that got raises, promotions, rose up the ladder on the backs of these programs that were not successful. Okay. I say all that because what you end up with is you're turning the service to humanity into an egotistical way of fulfilling your personal ambition. Yeah, I don't know either. Okay. So, okay, it's all right. So if I could caution you for anything, is that when you get around folks that have a ton of money and power can be very alluring and can be addictive. Yes? And oftentimes, to go into some Herbert Marcuse and one-dimensional man, these theoretical ideas, is that oftentimes you can think that you don't have any power until you access the power of the people in the suits. And that's untrue. A lot of time, the people in suits are trying to figure out a way to keep you away from their business. A lot of time, the people in suits are trying to figure out a way to keep you under their thumb. A lot of time, the people in suits are trying to figure out a way for you to spend so much time trying to be like them that you never actually learn who you are. Okay? So when we think about going into policy, just remember, there's some very high-level executives and high-level government officials that do really good work around the world. But there's even more individuals that are in communities every single day, doing that work in their little office, in their cubicle, etc., every single day, that are doing equally, if not more powerful work as well. And that can also be you, and that also, for most of you, that already is you. So you can sit in that and be satisfied that you are doing the good work. And if it always feels like, or sometimes it feels like it's not enough, I always caution against that. We wouldn't be where we are without each other. Period. We wouldn't be where we are without each other. And you have to rely on the fact, too, that you have colleagues around the world, counterparts around the world that are busting their tail, sorry, American reference, that they are working really hard to do good work for their people. And as soon as you give that up to maybe do something that maybe looks ambitious, but perhaps is not as effective as you thought, perhaps you don't get more powerful. Maybe you just get more acknowledged, and you've traded in power for acknowledgement. Okay, I'll stop there. Thanks for listening. Appreciate that. Yeah, okay. Okay, Q&A is fine. That's great. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to assist in the blue, but you can go right after that. Yeah. Thank you.
I came a little bit late. I'm Josette, and I'm USC. I've been living here for about like 18 years.
Right on.
And then but I live in Texas, but I'm originally from Democratic Republic of Congo.
Right on.
So I work for the city of Houston.
Okay.
And then I'm in the Houston Airport Department. So
Okay.
I work for the city. So when you were talking, I was actually in the middle, so I feel myself into what you were talking about. So what I'm gonna add on is basically like mostly about my own experience.
Okay.
As being a young woman, African Black, because there are differences based on living here for a long time.
Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to mention about the school environment. So I felt I had to work so hard to be accepted, first of all. So, we get excited as a young, girl. You're excited to say, okay, I'll come, because we have a different vision from outside than when we had to come, when we come here. So it was kind of hard in the way of being accepted, being accused, because I had an experience. I had a teacher that has a different race than me, and I could see it was with all the girls that had a F1 students visa. So they were all of them. He put a 60 to all of them. And as me, my first language is French. I went through all the tutoring and all those stuff, and he gave me a 60. He said because of plagiarism. I was like, you copy from the internet, right?
Yeah.
I would say, okay, that's fine. Because I knew I spent a lot of time on that. And I was like, okay, we have computers, right, on the room. Can you please show me? He wasn't able to do that. I was like, okay, that's fine. Thank God I was working for Houston Community College, where I worked for 13 years.
Nice.
And I had a lawyer that was a teacher at that time, and I was working for a chair, the department chair as well. So I was very close to her, and she used to live in Nigeria. So she's a Caucasian. She was very, very, she was like a second mom to me. I gave my paper to her. She put it on, turn it in, and for her, if she had to grade my paper, she would have given me like a 90.
Yeah.
And I also gave it to the other teacher. She did the same. And you know what they did? They helped me. Both of them. One was Caucasian. Another one, she's from Mexico. Both of them helped me write a letter to the teacher. The teacher that lives, used to live in New York. We sent that email to the teacher, and thank God that teacher recognizes wrongdoing and apologized to me.
Awesome.
Gave me an 85.
All right.
For me, I'm just going to give you an experience based on what I've encountered, that you have to know how to voice yourself. Especially my race, myself, you have to know. It's not you have to be polite, but if you know your rights, because I did 3 years lawyer back in Congo. So I know my right, I know how to fight for myself. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that at treatment environment right now, I work with a young man. He's from Bahamas.
Okay.
He's 23 years old. I understand. He's very motivated, very smart boy. But the thing is, I understand you want to get more experiences. But to me, I feel like they're giving him more work out of his work descriptions.
Sure.
But at the same time, I feel it's really not fair for him because he's doing a lot of work, and I feel like he's going to discourage him because we talk, me and him, we really talk. But I feel like it's kind of discouraging him if they can at least go ahead and, maybe give like a raise or something, like give him something a little bit more, when he does something outside of his work. I don't know what is your input on that, on how, we has to, to work.
Okay, well, I think I'll give you a short response to that situation. First of all, congratulations on getting the instructor to, change your grade. Yeah. So job descriptions here in the U.S., job descriptions are a part of labor policy. Okay, so if a person is asked to do more than what's on their job description, they can file a complaint with their human resources department. Okay. As a person that trains administrators, it's really important that we hold tight to what is actually in a person's job description, because it's also connected to their compensation and their rank in the organization. So once we start asking people to do more than what they're supposed to do, we're actually taking that off of someone else's plate, and that person then who is not doing it could be compensated for things they're not doing, and the person doing the extra labor is now undercompensated.
Yes.
And so it creates a problem for the organization. So it's good if that gentleman goes to his human resources person and says, whoever runs the hiring and compensation, and say, look, I just have a complaint. What is the formal complaint process? And he can file a complaint. But if he hasn't talked to his supervisor about it, he should do that first. Okay. So he can sit down, he can arrange a meeting and just say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about my job tasks. I feel like I'm doing more than what my job description says. Can you explain that to me? And if he feels like he doesn't get a sufficient answer, then he can go to human resources.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
You got time for one more question.
Sure.
There are like 3 minutes left.
She was going to go.
Can you make it short? We have 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Yes.
So first of all, thank you. I was
Thank you.
kind of late to
No worries.
but I would like just to compliment to my peers saying here, that everyone, like my vision is like we are human and we are in the center of the globe and we need a partnership and we don't need protection of human rights. We have already these rights. They're born with us. We just need to encourage each other, work together, cooperate with each other, and to raise our voice whenever something is wrong and there's some disrespect or violation of human rights. And just to encourage each other and to build cooperation, partnership, communication with each other. To be effective and to serve to the human race. Because our primary goal is like to live here, to create here, and to make families. So you need to stay faithful to this goal. And whenever your rights is violated, there is nothing like, okay, I'll handle it. You shouldn't complain and saying, there is, I'm a lady, you're violating, I am a child, you're violating. Okay, there is every kind of people around the world. Your 5 fingers in the hand are not the same. So there are billions of people living in the world. So you need to be humanist and you have human-centered. You said, okay, I accept your vision. You violate mine, so I'll react properly. Like this. And then you have to pave your partner like this in every day, in school, in kindergarten, even in your family. And then in the university, in the
Excuse me, can you
workplace.
please
So,
come on that question? We have one listener.
just to be a leader, to cure yourself for better, for kindness, and to be the leader of yourself and encourage the others as leaders. So I work for the UN Armenia, but I came here as a youth activist because I want to learn. And as Nelson Mandela says, the education is the strongest weapon of all the times.
Absolutely. Thank
I
you.
want to learn and to share and to learn with them and for them.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there any more? Please end. I'm getting, they're telling me to please end. So my email is dsmith, DSMITH, the number 1 and the number 3. So dsmith13 at usfca.edu. I enjoy talking strategy. So if you want to email me, I love talking about that.
Can we have your link, please?
dsmith13, the number 1 and number 3. So D Smith, and then the number 1 and the number 3. So dsmith13 at USF, like University of San Francisco, USFCA.edu. Yeah, thank you all. Look forward to hearing from you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good seeing you.
Yes.
Thank you for your comments.